It's March 1st, 1932. You're living in America and the country is literally falling apart. 1 out of every 4 people you know, they don't have a job. Banks are closing every week. People are standing in bread lines that stretch around city blocks. The suicide rate just hit an all-time high. And if you're lucky enough to still have a house, your neighbor probably just lost theirs. Things are not looking up. In fact, we're definitely venturing on rock bottom here.
And it's not just poor people. This is everybody. Middle-class families who did everything right. They saved their money, they bought a home, and they worked hard. But they're watching it all evaporate. Does it sound familiar? Have kids, they say. Get a house, they said. And you'll save so much. Yeah, not so much. Women are literally making dresses out of flour sacks. Companies started printing patterns on the bags because they knew people were using them for clothing, minus the flour bags. Do you see the similarities? You do everything right, do what you were told to do, and then the reward is poverty?
But guess what? In the middle of this misery, America has one thing to cling to. One golden, untouchable symbol of hope. One God above man. One true Chad incarnate. One man who proves that America's dream isn't dead. His name? Charles Augustus Lindbergh. 5 years earlier, this 25-year-old kid from Minnesota did something that no human being had ever done before. He flew solo, nonstop, across the Atlantic Ocean.
33 and a half hours alone in a tiny plane with no radio, no GPS, no co-pilot. He hadn't slept in 55 hours by the time he landed at Le Bourget field outside of Paris, and how many black beauties he ingested remains unclear. But this all led to a landing with 100,000 people waiting for him. He became the most famous person on the planet literally overnight. Time magazine named him their first ever Man of the Year. There were ticker tape parades, the Congressional Gold Medal was given to him, the French Legion of Honor, all at the age of 25.
And I hope his mom never met mine.
Running theme.
But the point here, and what really matters about this story is Lindbergh wasn't just famous, he was sacred. He was an idol, American one. In a decade of wild excess, bootlegging, and celebrity worship, he was the opposite of all that. He was quiet, by all accounts, extremely modest. He turned down millions in endorsement deals. In a country that was starting to lose faith in itself, Lindbergh was proof that one brave, humble American could still do the impossible. He was as American as a hamburger. as French fries.
Oh, gosh.
Never mind. Just trust me when I say he was a damn proud American.
So, when this 20-month-old baby disappeared right from his crib that night in March, it didn't just break his family. It broke and scarred America forever.
Welcome to Mugshot Mysteries. I'm Gabriel.
And I'm Kathryn. And today, we're covering what the press called the crime of a century, the kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh Jr., the most famous baby in America.
Sneaky footsteps in the night, clues that vanish out of sight. Grab your hat and magnifying glass. We'll talk this case and have a blast. Mugshot Mysteries, we're on the trail. Twists and turns that never fail. Laughs and chills, it's quite the show. Who did it? Tune in to know.
Now, this one is massive. Most people have heard of the Lindbergh baby. I grew up knowing of it, but I didn't know a lot about it. But what most people don't know about the investigation is how questionable the trial was and how much of what we think we know might be wrong. This is not a cut and dry story. It is a mystery, and there are mugshots involved. Therefore, it is a perfect avenue for us. Right up our alley, some would say. And we even got the right type of shoes on.
Oh my gosh. And because this is Mugshot Mysteries, we're not just telling you a story. We're putting you inside of 1932 America, because you cannot understand this crime without understanding what the world looked like when it happened. The Great Depression isn't just background noise to the story. It's the reason this case went down exactly the way it did.
So let's talk about the most famous man in the world and why he was famous at all.
Okay, so here's the thing about Charles Lindbergh that I didn't fully appreciate until I really researched this. We don't have a modern equivalent. Now bear with me. We really just don't. And maybe this is like a hot take, but I swear I'm not doing that Fox News or ESPN thing. You might be thinking, yeah, we do. We have Elon Musk or somebody like that.
Boo. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, not Elon Musk. What I need you to do is imagine if Michael Jordan, Denzel Washington, and Tony Stark all just Voltron together, and then also everyone's grandmother had their photo on the mantelpiece. Yeah, that's Lindbergh in 1927. He really was beyond revered.
Which is impressive if Denzel Washington is just a third of his power.
Exactly.
So, when Lindbergh took off from Long Island, the week before, there had been nothing but horrible headlines. French pilots lost over the Atlantic, school bombing in Michigan, mine explosion deaths, Mississippi River flooding and killing people. America was drowning in bad news, and then this kid takes off. And I can say kid because he was only 25, and guess what? I'm not 25.
And the whole country just stopped. People gathered around their radios, and remember, radio is still relatively new technology at this point, kiddos. This is 1927. There is no television, and the way people are consuming this story is either through radio or waiting for the morning newspaper. And when he lands in Paris, the celebration is unlike anything that had happened before in modern media.
4 million people lined the streets for his ticker tape parade in New York. 4 million. That's more than any president's ever gotten. That's more than the Lakers get on their parades. He received 3.5 million letters. That's a whole lot of stamps. He was offered over $5 million in endorsements and movie deals. Now, and this is 1927 money, which is roughly $100 million today. And he turned almost all of it down. Why? Well, I guess we'll answer that later, but also, why the heck is this guy so famous? And this is the piece that matters for our story. Why did America go this insane over a guy in a plane? Because it really wasn't about the plane.
It's about identity. The 1920s, which is the Roaring '20s, a time that I am so fascinated by, it really had been this wild decade of consumerism, partying, bootlegging, flappers, jazz, excess. And there was this anxiety underneath all of it that America had lost something. That rugged individualism, the pioneer spirit, and values that built the country. They were being drowned out by the materialism and celebrity worship. The old guard worried about the youth, where they were going, what this nation was turning into. You know, you're talking about parents that were born in the early 1900s and then grandparents that were born in the mid 1800s. Their perspectives did not include loving this newfound debauchery. Their generation included trying not to take a cannonball to their kneecaps.
Civil War joke?
War jokes.
And then here comes Lindbergh, alone in a tiny plane he helped design. No fanfare, no team, just a one-man lone wolf against the ocean. Young, part of this new flapper generation, except nothing like them at all. Grandmas loved him. Older generations saw a young man to be proud of. Why can't you be more like Charlie Pie? The grandmas probably asked over dinner.
Wow.
That girl you're going with parades her ankles around like a marching band.
Exactly. You need to cover them ankles up, young lady. No, but really, a historian named John William Ward wrote about this brilliantly. He said America was caught in this paradox. They wanted to celebrate individual heroism and modern technology all at the same time. Lindbergh was both. He was the cowboy and the engineer, the pioneer and the future. He resolved this anxiety about modernity that the whole country was feeling. He was an everyman, good to the core, or at least he was from the outside.
And then he comes home and he's humble about it. He's quiet. He doesn't want any attention. In an age of celebrity sensations, his modesty becomes celebrated in and itself. That's actually a quote from a biographer. His reluctance to be famous made people worship him even more. Guys, remember, be mysterious. Don't say a whole lot, and the girls will make up the rest. Here, the public did the guesswork. The public was a girl at a bar after a bad breakup called the Civil War.
Okay, wow. And also, you talked a whole lot when we met. So let's just say you didn't take your own advice.
I bagged you, didn't I?
Ew. So, moving on from that, you now got this man who was essentially the emotional anchor of an entire nation. He marries Anne Morrow, the daughter of a diplomat who is beautiful, brilliant, and she becomes a co-pilot and a navigator. So, perfect couple. They have a baby, little Charlie, and the press calls him the Eaglet. And this family becomes the Kennedys before the Kennedys. I mean, they're basically American royalty.
So, This makes what happens next not just a crime, it's a national trauma. And I want to get into the house itself because where they live tells us a lot about what was going on through Lindbergh's mind. And a lot of it is, I don't want to be next to a living human being.
I mean, I don't mind being next to you, but I'm okay with the reclusiveness.
So we're going to talk about that night. Lindbergh is obsessed with privacy. And I mean obsessed. Remember, this man became one of the first modern celebrities whose private life was public property. Paparazzi wasn't even a term yet, but make no mistake, reporters are stalking his family. They're publishing what he eats for dinner. There's only so many times you can get outed for eating canned tuna before you lose it. He despises it. So he builds this estate. It's in the middle of nowhere. Highfields near Hopewell, New Jersey. Remote, isolated. The road leading to it is a dirt path. It is full on BFE.
Which I also like that. But it was that same isolation that was supposed to protect his family that made them vulnerable. There were no neighbors close by, no one to see or hear anything. He chose privacy over security, and unfortunately, that decision is going to haunt him.
Yeah, no one to see or hear or anything. That's like a horror movie tagline.
I think every horror movie starts off that way.
And virgins. No. Now, here's a timeline of that night. And this is the start of a lot of pretty eerie facts. The Lindberghs were not even supposed to be at Highfields on March 1st. The routine was to spend weekends there and return to Morrow Estate in Inglewood on Mondays. But little Charlie had a cold and Anne decided they were going to stay the night.
So someone either knew they were still there or had been watching the house. And that's important. You're going to want to remember that.
So it's 7:30 at night, and the baby's nurse, Betty Gow, and Anne put little Charlie to bed, and this is a second-floor nursery. Betty rubs Vicks on his chest for the cold, and she puts him in his sleeping suit, and now it's 9 p.m. Lindbergh himself is sitting downstairs in the living room, and he hears a sound. It's a crack. He later described it as the sound of wood slapping against wood, which could probably mean a few things. And like a orange crate breaking. And he doesn't investigate. At 10 p.m., Betty Gow goes up to check on the baby, and now the crib is empty.
She checks with Anne. Do you have the baby? And Anne says no. She asks Lindbergh. He also says no. He goes straight to the nursery and sees an envelope on the windowsill, and he doesn't open it. He knows immediately what's happened. He turns to the butler and says, "They've stolen our baby."
Message that shocked the world comes in on the police teletype. A message that stunned the imagination, that made every parent shudder, and that brings into instant action the entire facilities of the nation's law enforcing agencies. Out over the wires, and immediately there begins the greatest manhunt in the history of modern crime. Only a few minutes have passed since the message was flashed. It isn't much beyond midnight, and already the state troopers are going through the neighborhood with a fine-tooth comb to meet the challenge of a criminal degenerate. Not a single bet is overlooked, not a single suspicion unverified in the search for the most famous baby in the world. Innocent, bled, 20-month-old son of the lone eagle and his mate. The victim of as cruel and fiendish a crime as any human can be guilty of. These poses are enlargements of small films photographed by Colonel Lindbergh himself and show the youngster in the last pictures ever taken of him, a child well worthy of the love of parents, floor of the home in Sarland Hills. The crime was committed by means of a ladder placed against the house. The baby was stolen, dressed in his little sleeping suit, by 2 men and a woman, we believe. The kidnapper wore heavy woolen socks to disguise his footprints, but the search goes on just the same. Officers of the law, as well as the kindly farmers of the vicinity, trying to help their neighbors, Lindy and Anne, a father and mother who have lost their child. Daylight only makes the search more intense. The Jersey side of the Holland Tunnel and the entrance to the great George Washington Bridge, looking for the writer of this message. And the whole Lindbergh home will soon see its baby safe in his crib, the very same crib they took him from. I'd sure like to have that kidnapper alone for just about 4 minutes. Well, come back soon, little Lindy. Our hearts are with you.
So he grabs a rifle and he goes outside. Under the window, there are marks in the mud, and propped against the wall in pieces is a homemade ladder. It's broken at the joint where the 2 sections meet. that cracking sound he heard. Someone had climbed that ladder, they had went through the window, they had taken the baby, and they had climbed back down.
Now, what happens now is critical for understanding everything that follows. Lindbergh takes charge of the investigation, not the police. Lindbergh, Colonel H. Norman Schwarzkopf, yes, the father of the Gulf War general, if you're old enough to remember, was the head of the New Jersey State Police, and technically this is his case. But Lindbergh is so powerful, so revered, that Schwarzkopf essentially gives up control.
Now, Lindbergh starts making a series of decisions that would be considered insane by modern law enforcement standards. He allows friends and associates to just wander the crime scene. He insists on handling negotiations with the kidnappers himself. He isolates household staff from police questioning. He's controlling this investigation like a military operation, but guess what? He's not a detective or a Schwarzkopf. It's like the reverse would be him getting told how to pull a yoke, it's the only nautical term I can think of at this moment.
From a psych profile, this makes sense. This is a man whose entire identity is built on self-reliance. He flew the Atlantic alone. He doesn't trust institutions, and he doesn't trust the press. He certainly doesn't trust anyone but himself. And now the thing that he loves the most in the world has been taken, and his instinct is, I'll fix this myself. But that instinct, that need for control, is going to contaminate this case from the very beginning, quite literally.
So let's talk about the ransom note. The very famous ransom note, I should say. It's the first note, and it's found on the windowsill of the nursery. It demands $50,000, and Kathryn, the handwriting on this thing is what we would call extremely conspicuous.
Yeah, it's terrible handwriting with terrible grammar and spelling, but based on the handwriting alone, I think it was clear early on that this wasn't a girl.
I would agree. Was it bubbly? It wasn't bubbly. Therefore, wasn't a girl.
I do write bubbly.
Yeah, because you're a girl.
Well, the writer is clearly someone whose first language is German. They write gut where an English speaker would write good. The phrasing, the word order, it's all consistent with a German speaker translating in their head. And we'll make sure we post a picture on our socials so that you can see. It's extremely distinct.
Would you say it's good? No. There's a unique symbol at the bottom of the note, and it looks like this. So it's 2 interlocking circles with a red dot in the center, and then 3 holes punched through. This becomes the kidnapper's signature. And they state in the very first letter that each new letter they get is going to have the same one. And this is how they're going to authenticate all their communications.
Now, what happens over the next 2 months is an absolute circus. Everyone in America wants to help. I mean, Al Capone even offers his services from prison, like a mob version of Hannibal Lecter. A retired school teacher from the Bronx named John Condon places an ad in a newspaper offering to be an intermediary. And somehow, and I really mean somehow, the kidnappers actually respond to him.
And this is where it gets surreal. Condon, who goes by the codename Jafsy, starts meeting the kidnapper in the Bronx, in person, in cemeteries, at night. This old school teacher is meeting a kidnapper in a graveyard, and Lindbergh is just sitting in the car in the darkness nearby, listening. It's ridiculous because they don't have microphones. He's just sitting in the car trying to listen from afar.
Okay, but can we pause there? If I knew that the kidnapper was right there in the cemetery, I'm jumping out of the car and
Well, I mean, the idea
him.
is that he knows where the baby is.
Yeah, and I'm going to make him take me to it by pulling his ear. Let's go.
It's clear that you're a Batgirl.
No, I'm Catwoman. And the man Condon calls himself John. He has a German accent, and he's nervous. He tells Condon the baby's safe on a boat, and they negotiate. The price goes up to $70,000. And on April 2nd, 1932, Condon hands over $50,000 in marked gold certificates at St. Raymond Cemetery in the Bronx. In exchange, he gets a note saying the baby is on a boat called Nellie near Martha's Vineyard.
There's no boat called Nellie, and there's probably, unsurprisingly, no boat at all. They search and nothing. And then on May 12th, a truck driver named Orville Wilson pulls over on a road about 4.5 miles from the Lindbergh home. His assistant, a man named William Allen, walks into the woods to relieve himself, and there he finds the body of a baby.
Charlie had been killed the night of the kidnapping, which means when Condon was meeting Cemetery John, when the ransom was being negotiated and paid, little Charlie was already gone. He'd been dead for weeks.
Betty Gow identified the body by the shirt she'd made for the baby and by his overlapping toes on the right foot. Lindbergh insisted on cremation, and as an aside and a reminder, William Allen, the man who actually found the body, he wasn't paid his $5,000 until 2 years after the execution of the man convicted of the crime. He was a black man in 1932 America, and the Lindberghs apparently never even acknowledged him.
And why mention that? Well, that's the kind of context that matters. This isn't just a crime story. This is a story about America. Who mattered, who didn't, who got to control the narrative. The Great Depression, the class divide, the racial divide, it's all woven into this case. All right, Gabriel, I want to stop the crime story here for just a minute because I think we owe everyone a refresher on what was happening in America when this baby disappeared.
Okay, let's do it.
Because quite honestly, if you don't understand the Great Depression, you really can't understand this case. You can't understand the investigation or the trial or even the public reaction. So let's do a little intro into depression, and it doesn't involve ice cream. Sorry.
So, I love this stuff.
Same.
And I think people, me, assume they know this stuff. And, like when a kid asks you how rain is made, and I just meekly talk about nimbus clouds and rain fairies. Most of us just remember stock market crashed and people were poor and Dust Bowl and FDR. And there's much more to it than that, obviously.
You about summed it up right there. So let's start at the beginning. Remember I told you, this is the Roaring 20s. This is the period of excess and awesome and scandalous for the time because there were knee-length headlines. America just came out of World War I as the most powerful economy on the planet. Factories are booming, cars are everywhere. Ford Model Ts changed American life and definitely baby making. Now, this will sound silly, but electricity is spreading out like a spider's web. People have refrigerators, radios, washing machines for the very first time. Consumer culture is born, and with all this new wealth, people start investing.
And the stock market is going nuts. Between 1921 and September 1929, when things went bad, the Dow Jones went from 63 to 381, which I assume is as impressive as it sounds. That's a six-fold increase. And people, regular people, not just rich bankers, talking your barber and your taxi driver and your school teacher and your bookie and your mistress, they're all pumping money in. And remember, our friend Charlie Ponzi, he's right in the thick of it, the height of it, right there and then. As I said then, Ponzi pays until he doesn't.
Now, the rub here is that most of these people are buying stocks on margin. Now, since my financial literacy does consist, I freely admit, of girl math, let's talk about what I learned, very recently. Margin means that you put down something like 10% of the stock's value, and then you borrow the other 90%. So for every dollar you actually have, you're betting $9 that you don't have. And as long as prices keep going up, you're golden. But if they go down, even I know that isn't a good sale, and that you're in big trouble.
That's right. It's only 50% off at Target. So yes, not good. Because at that point in time, you are absolutely destroyed. You're bamboozled, ramshackled, ragamuffined.
That's a lot of words.
Because the broker calls you and they're like, pay up the rest of what you owe. And guess what? You don't have it. And that's exactly what happened. And guess what? You can only beat so many pennies out of a man because at some point, they don't have any money to pay you back.
Well, they won't have pennies anymore.
I guess pennies were a little bit more back then. Maybe it's half pence.
Wow. So it's October 1929, Black Thursday, which occurred on October 24th. 12.9 million shares are traded in a single day of panic selling. Then, Black Tuesday, October 29th. 16.4 million shares. The market doesn't just dip, it collapses, and then it keeps collapsing. By July of 1932, the Dow bottoms out at 41. From 381 to 41. That's an 89% loss. A dollar invested in stocks became barely more than a dime. Did I do good explaining that there?
Baby, you did amazing.
Thanks.
So now, the stock market crash alone didn't cause the Great Depression. I know we just made that a big deal, but only 2.5% of Americans actually own stocks. So why did the whole country fall apart like a crummy cookie?
Because the crash exposed everything else that was rotten underneath. The banking system was a house of cards. Banks had been lending money recklessly to stock speculators, to farmers who couldn't repay, to foreign countries rebuilding after World War I, there was no FDIC, no federal insurance on your deposits. So when banks started failing, your life savings just vanished, gone. No recourse, no bailout, just gone. Now, banks, I know. Let's talk about some bad banking outcomes.
Yep, because 4,000 banks fail in the first wave, 9,000 total over the course of the 1930s. $7 billion in deposits are frozen or lost. And every time a bank fails, people panic and they rush to pull out all their money. And if there's no money there, they go to other banks, which cause those banks to fail too. It's the domino effect. It's called a bank run. You've seen it on A Wonderful Life, if you've seen that movie. That scene where everyone's at the bank demanding their money, that was real life, and that was happening everywhere.
And then the government just makes it worse, which, no surprise, right? Congress passes the Smoot-Hawley tariff in 1930, which is two things: a massively funny name and massive taxes on imported goods, thinking, let's protect American businesses. But what happens is every other country retaliates with their own tariffs, and international trade just collapses. Economists almost universally agree that this was one of the worst policy decisions in American history. The less that's said about today's tariffs, the better. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve, which is supposed to be managing the money supply, raises interest rates instead of lowering them. They're tightening the noose while people are already suffocating. They had the red and blue wire and they cut the wrong one, and things just exploded from there.
So you've got a stock market crash wiping out investors. There's banks failing and eating people's savings. There's trade collapsing, and the government is making the wrong moves at every single turn. And underneath all of that, and this is the root cause that nobody talks about enough, half the families in America were already living at or below the poverty line. Even during the supposed roaring 20s, there was not many people that were actually roaring with laughter.
Truth. Because that's the dirty secret of the 1920s. Well, then and now. The prosperity was concentrated at the top. Farmers never recovered from post-war price drops. Corn can only make so much money because the average America can only pop so much. We might make up for most of America.
What do you mean?
Popping corn. I'm serious. Like, if we have
one box a week. At minimum.
Well, truthfully, guys,
like,
if
you got a problem, we're like, no, we don't got a problem. And we go to different stores so they don't see us buying a new box.
It's true. We're like making our grocery list, and it's like, how many bags of popcorn we got? 7. That's not enough. We'll buy more. Sorry, guys. Factory workers' wages stayed as flat as a week-old 2-liter while profits soared. In 1929, the top 1% of Americans held about a third of all its wealth. Sound familiar? The wealth gap in the 1920s looked a lot like the wealth gap today. And when the bottom falls out, the people who are barely hanging on are the first to drown. If your head is barely above water as it is, Smooty and Holly just jackknife on top of the average American's head.
So, let's talk about what the Depression looked like on the ground floor. We've already covered the economics.
Thankfully.
Now, let's talk about what this actually looked like for a regular person. Because statistics are one thing, but living in that statistic is another.
Exactly. And by 1932, the year the Lindbergh baby is kidnapped, unemployment is between 23 and 25%, which would be great for those 25% if they weren't actively looking for jobs. 1 out of every 4 working age, I really hope I ace this interview, Americans have no job. And there's no unemployment insurance, no food stamps, no welfare system as we know it. If you lose your job, you are completely on your own. Truly. You may not think what you can get these days is enough, but it is something, and there is at least a system in place.
So in New York City, there are roughly 82 bread lines. 50,000 people are living on the streets. Teachers are feeding 11,000 students in Chicago out of their own pockets, God bless them. And this is even though the city hasn't paid the teachers in months. In Detroit, the city converts vacant lots into thrift gardens. And this is where people can actually grow food. And those gardens are feeding 20,000 people. This arrangement would have worked terribly for a man of my gardening abilities.
And a woman of mine. Because again, if you remember, women are making clothing out of flour sacks, and that companies were printing flower patterns on the bags because they knew that families were using them for fabric, which was kind. People are eating dandelion greens, which if you don't know, are those weeds with that one pretty yellow flower. They're eating stale bread soaked in milk, ketchup soup, which is literally hot water with ketchup. Families share single potatoes for dinner. And then churches run potlucks that become the only real meal that some people get all week.
And if you lose your home, which millions of people did, you end up in a Hooverville. And this is named mockingly after President Herbert Hoover, a strong pull yourself up from the bootstraps type of guy, which is a nonsensical way of saying, you're on your own, kid. People blamed him for the whole disaster. These are shanty towns made up of cardboard and scrap metal and anything they could find, really. And they spring up in every major city. Central Park had one. There's one along the Potomac River in the shadow of the Capitol building. The symbolism is kind of brutal. They might have had a little yard sale in front of the White House.
And here's what makes this psychologically devastating beyond just the material suffering. America in the 1920s had just sold an entire generation on a very specific idea. Work hard, save your money, buy a house, invest wisely, and you will be fine. The American dream. We've all heard about that. And millions of people did do that. They did everything right, and they still lost everything anyway. That's bringing flowers, fancy restaurants, and those old-timey heart-shaped chocolates leading to a ghosting so severe that you've got ectoplasm on your shoes.
Ghostbusters. Yeah. So,
why are you taking my singing away from me?
Yeah. The suicide rate jumped 30% between 1928 and 1932. 3 times as many people were admitted to mental hospitals and faced nurse ratchets, men especially, because in 1930s America, your worth as a man was entirely tied to your ability to provide. If you couldn't feed your family, you weren't just poor, you were a failure. You were less than. Some men simply just walked out the front door and never came back. They abandoned their families rather than face the advice of Kanye.
Never take the advice of Kanye. Older kids left home voluntarily so their parents would have one fewer mouth to feed. There were an estimated 250,000 teenage hobos, and I say this for historical accuracy because, yeah, probably not a PC term today, but they're riding the rails. Children riding freight trains, sleeping in ditches, because staying home meant someone else in the family went hungry. It's noble and it's terrible and a bit unfathomable to think about. So Gabriel, this is the part that I kind of really want to get into because you've been reading about the psych part of this, and I think it's the key to understanding everything that happens in the Lindbergh case. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree, and I'm glad you asked. No. So there is a concept that I really believe in, and it's called the scarcity mindset. 2 researchers, and I will try really hard not to obliterate the pronunciation, Sendil Mullanofen, and he's from Harvard, and Eldar Shafir, and he's from Princeton, which, I mean, are 2 fairly respected schools. I mean, not as good as state schools. And they wrote a groundbreaking book about it. And what they found out is that when people don't have enough of something, that could be money, food, time, safety, it fundamentally rewires how the brain works. It's not just that you're sad or stressed, your actual cognitive function changes. It needs to. It's a survival mechanism. It sounds logical, and so it is.
You know, I'm curious about how it rewires the brain because when you're explaining it to me, I start thinking about modern day influencers and people who are looking at the travel influencers and the excess that they have, and suddenly they're spending more money than they should and comparing themselves to that. So clearly a rewiring is happening because that's like an epidemic today. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree wholeheartedly. And I know you are the social influencer master.
I mean,
I'm not saying you are one. I'm saying you know of them.
I was going to say, I mean, on Mugshot Mystery Podcast, if you'd like to follow us, but we don't have any access on there at all. We just have crime things.
Socially influence anything.
No. So tell me, because truly, how does it rewire the brain?
So I think of it like a computer, right? So scarcity creates what they call a bandwidth tax. Your brain becomes so consumed with the thing you lack that it steals processing power from everything else. Our brain is a computer, and it is one that begs for an upgrade sometimes. In one study, they looked at sugarcane farmers in India and found that before the harvest, when money was the tightest, they performed significantly worse on cognitive tests than after the harvest, when they were flush and diabetes came.
Wow.
The difference was equivalent to a 13-point drop in the IQ. Not because they were less intelligent, because poverty itself was eating into brain power like a terrible work huddle.
So you're saying that an entire country experiencing the Depression was essentially dumber, for lack of a better word?
Yes, they were in my natural state. It goes further than that. When you're in scarcity mode, your brain shifts to short-term thinking. You make impulsive decisions. You become hyper-focused on the thing you lack, and you can't see the bigger picture. You become more susceptible to temptation, more reactive, more emotional. Your ability to plan ahead collapses. You're essentially a toddler looking for a cookie fix, or I guess a heartbroken lover.
And this is a whole country of people experiencing this at once, guys.
At once, 4 years. And scarcity does two contradictory things to a society simultaneously.
All right, I'm listening.
So, on one hand, scarcity breeds envy and comparison and resentment. When resources are scarce, you start looking at what other people have with different, greedy, beady eyes. Your neighbor still has a car? Well, why? His daddy must be rich. The guy down the street still has his job? Must be nice, Mr. 9 to 5. You see the Waldorf Astoria hosting lavish parties like this is the Mask of the Red Death, while you're just standing there in a bread line and something inside you hardens like a stone. The social scientists call it relative deprivation. It's not just about what you lack in absolute terms, it's about what you lack compared to others. In that comparison, it makes people angry. It makes them resentful. It makes them look for someone to blame.
Which explains why immigrants became the target. Why anyone who seems different or foreign becomes a scapegoat.
Exactly. Nativism surges during an economic crisis. Always has. When there aren't enough jobs, the first question people ask is, who's taking mine? And the answer is never systematic banking failures or bad monetary policy or dragon hoarders. The answer is always a face. It's always a person. It's always a other. In 1930s, that means immigrants, Black Americans, anyone who could be painted as not deserving of what little is left.
I'm gonna pass over the fact that you had to talk like a Southern person when you were saying that and move on to, but you said scarcity does two things? Can you explain that to me?
Well, bless your heart, sweetheart. What did I say that sounded Southern? Because I honestly don't know. So, scarcity does other things. Because the other side of this is, and this is a part that actually quite beautiful, is that shared suffering can also create incredible solidarity. When everybody is struggling, there's a leveling that happens. Your pride breaks down. The barriers between neighbors dissolve. You start becoming bros. Research shows that in homogeneous communities where people feel like they're all in the same boat, scarcity actually increases cooperation. People share more. They look out for each other more. They form bonds that would never have existed in good times. It's bros versus everyone else. I think we've all seen it, right? The problem is they gotta feel the same as you do.
And you see that in the Depression stories, right? The church potlucks, neighbors bringing each other food, communities pooling their resources.
There's those stories of the elk clubs feeding people. There's New York City police officers donating 1% of their salaries to feed strangers they found starving on the street. Teachers, God bless them, again, are spending their own money they weren't even being paid to feed students. That's extraordinary. That's humans at their best. It just says something that people who have the least were giving out the most.
So scarcity brings out both the worst and the best in people, fundamentally, right?
Yeah, it completely does. And here's the look at the big brain on Gabe's philosophical question. What determines which one wins? What makes one person respond to that deprivation with generosity and another person just getting pissed off like someone just cut them off in a Ford Model T? And I think the answer is the narrative. The story you tell yourself about why you're suffering.
All right, elaborate.
So if you believe we're all in this together, the system has failed us, we need to take care of each other, you get people standing pat against the world. You get those potlucks, you get those thrift gardens, for those who can garden, not me.
Or me.
And you get neighbors sharing potatoes like this is In and Out. But if you believe someone took what's mine, someone is getting something I'm not getting, there's a villain out there, and if we just punish them, things will be better. You get that biblical scapegoating. You get lynch mobs. You get a jury that convicts a German carpenter 5 weeks because the whole country needs someone to punch in the face, and they just don't want to get punched back.
You have painted such a beautiful picture. Would you like to know what picture you've painted for me?
Please do tell me.
I am now watching Beauty and the Beast, and there is a mob, and they're all going, "Kill the beast!" And that's what I have pictured.
Would not have guessed that.
Gaston is leading the charge.
Thought I was saying something a little bit more pertinent and hard-hitting than kill the beast, but...
It's hard-hitting, it's Disney, and people will follow me. And in 1932, both of those narratives are running at warp speed.
And they're running at warp speed in the same neighborhoods, because sometimes that same person, and this is the duality of man, they share their last potato with their neighbor on a Monday, and on Tuesday they might be screaming at the bar about that rich daddy boy getting the job, because scarcity makes you one thing. It makes you desperate. And desperation is unpredictable. Desperation is a fucking troll, man.
And meanwhile, the super rich are acting like the Depression isn't even happening. The Waldorf Astoria opens in 1931 at a cost of $42 million, which, you guys, that is $600 million in today's money. That's like a football stadium, a gaudy one, a cowboy one. Ugh, I even hate saying it, but their stadium is...
Nice.
I'm not going to say it. We're stopping there. And William Randolph Hearst is throwing costume parties at his castle, again, like a freaking dystopian Edgar Allan Poe story. Socialites are having coming out balls at the Ritz. A gardener in Los Angeles could be hired for $1 a week. $1 a week. Think about it. People are pissed. I'm pissed thinking about it.
I feel like coming out balls back then were different than now.
Wow. And the wows are continuing. You guys got your shot glasses out?
So people see this. They know. And because you can see it, that's a daily reminder that some people have everything while you got nothing. That's gasoline on the fire of that little devil on your shoulder. Studies on relative deprivation show that it's not absolute poverty that drives people to the breaking point. At that point, you might just say the hell with it. It's the gap. It's seeing the distance between your reality and someone else's. The wider that gap, the more rage you carry. And in 1932, that gap is a freaking canyon, man. It's an impact crater.
So you know what's wild? Everything you just described, the envy, the comparison, the social influencing, that scapegoating that you talked about, you know, the gap between the rich and the poor and the need for a villain.
Killing the beast, yeah.
Yes, kill the beast. Well, it sounds like 2025 as much as it sounds like 1932. Not that we get political here on Mugshot Mysteries.
Never.
Just an observation, just an honest observation.
So I think it absolutely does. And that's why you pay attention in history, or, you know, at least like give it 75%. These patterns repeat because human psychology doesn't change. The technology changes, though iPhones barely change anymore, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
The names change. A society under economic pressure will always produce the same behaviors: hoarding, blaming, comparing, and searching desperately for someone to hold responsible. I personally blame those social influencers and when people do live chats, because you would never do such a thing.
I mean, that is a personal attack. Is it because somebody told me to go be a trad wife?
I don't even know what the trad wife means.
I tried to explain that to them, but, you know, they didn't listen. If you're listening to this, now you know.
Is that like somebody who cooks?
And then some. They might do some gardening on the side, so if you want to eat, you don't want a trad wife.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't want one.
Okay, moving on. So with all of that as context, a country with its brain running on empty, going between solidarity and rage and pissed about the gap between the rich and poor, looking for villains like this is the DC universe, what happens when Charles Lindbergh's baby is taken?
The country breaks at its seams, man. That country looks like me after a buffet because Lindbergh isn't just a celebrity. He's the one remaining symbol that the American dream still exists. He's the bald eagle, man. He's the boy from Minnesota who conquered the world with grit and a tiny airplane. If even he's not safe, if even the golden boy can't protect his child, And what hope does anyone else have, really?
And that rage has been building for 3 years. The rage at the banks, at the politicians, at the rich, at fate itself. All of that rage now has a focal point. Find the person who did this. Find them and destroy them. Not just for the Lindberghs, for all of us. For every breadline, every foreclosure, and every father who walked out the door because he couldn't face his kids. Someone has to pay. This is Genesis. The floods are coming.
And that's the psychological state of the nation when Bruno Hauptmann walks into that courtroom. He's not just on trial for kidnapping. He's on trial for everything America has been suffering through. And whether he did it or not, and we'll get to that, the country was going to convict someone because they needed to. So let's actually talk about the investigation. And it's a lot of fuck-ups. So the baby is found on May 1932, and now there's nothing. The case goes cold. The FBI is involved, but only in an advisory capacity until the body is discovered. J. Edgar Hoover is newly empowered, but still building the commie-breaking agency. The New Jersey State Police are overwhelmed by the sheer fame of this all, and Lindbergh is still trying to control the investigation like some makeshift private detective. It's like someone trying to represent themselves in court. It has literally never gone right in the whole entire history of court.
Maybe once or twice, but I'm not searching.
So then there's Violet Sharp. And I really wanted to say Violent Sharp, which is just a way cooler name. But she's a maid in the Morrow household. And just as a reminder, this is Lindbergh's sister-in-law, who the police suspected of being an inside accomplice. She killed herself with poison before her 4th police interrogation. Her involvement was later ruled out because she had a verified alibi for the night of March 1st. Not so great.
I mean, that's dark. Whether she was involved or not, and the evidence says she wasn't, the pressure of the investigation drove this woman to take her own life. And the police just barely blinked. They moved on to the next lead. This was a case that they wanted to solve no matter the collateral damage.
So maybe in a moment of good forensics, but also complete dumb luck, there is a move that ultimately cracks the case. Before the ransom money was handed over, investigators meticulously recorded every single serial number of every single gold certificate, which, smart. And in 1933, something happens that nobody could have predicted. FDR signs an executive order requiring all gold certificates to be returned to the Treasury. So now, anyone still holding gold certificates is going to stick out like a sore thumb. And guess what the ransom taker has a lot of? Gold certificates.
And nobody planned for that. It was an economic policy decision that had nothing to do with the Lindbergh case, and it became the trap that caught the suspect. This is like that Michael Scott meme where he's taking credit for something he had nothing to do with.
Which is a great meme.
It is.
So for 2 years, marked bills trickle in. A few here, a few there, all in the Bronx area. And then on September 15th, 1934, and this is 2.5 years after the kidnapping, a gas station attendant in Upper Manhattan accepts a $10 gold certificate from a pretty suspicious customer. He writes the license plate number on the bill. That bill turns out to be from the Lindbergh ransom, and that license plate number belongs to a German immigrant carpenter named Bruno Richard Hauptmann. Well, Dragnet finally worked.
All right, Gabriel. So yes, let's talk about Bruno Hauptmann, who is either the most obvious kidnapper in criminal history, or he's one of the most tragic wrongful conviction cases in American history. And nearly a century later, serious people disagree about which one it is.
Oh, let me lay out who he was. Born in 1899 in Keimes, Germany, youngest of 5 children. And here's a little interesting tidbit. Nobody called this dude Bruno. You're gonna sing, aren't you?
I am already going, they don't talk about Bruno.
And that's your one. So
No, I think that's my 2. Is it?
Well, I think it's 1. I don't know. You can have 2 if you want.
The people in our drinking game will let us know.
Yeah, you can have 2. So his family and friends kind of hilariously call him Richard. The prosecution deliberately used Bruno at trial because it sounded more foreign. It's a conscious choice. They obviously want to other him. Though in this trial, there was probably no need to, because you'll see.
So he had a criminal record in Germany. He had actually been convicted of a robbery that included a second-story job using a ladder. Remember? He entered the United States illegally after 2 previous failed attempts, so this is not a choir boy. But having a record doesn't make you a kidnapper, not necessarily.
Can you sing like a choir boy?
I'm not sure if he did.
So he married Anna Schuffler in 1925. She was a German waitress. By all accounts, they had a normal, ho-hum life. He worked as a carpenter. They had a son in 1933. Anna didn't even know his first name was Bruno until he was arrested.
And they started singing.
Telling you, men are better at the starting second lives than you girls.
Well, you better keep one life, mister, so keep that in mind. Now, the arrest itself, September 19th, 1934. The police have been surveilling him since the gas station bill. Hauptmann realizes he's being followed and he tries to flee in his car. And there is nothing like an old-timey OJ car chase. Running red lights, speeding, and then he gets boxed in by a truck. He's arrested with a $20 gold certificate from the ransom on his person, which is pretty damn incriminating stuff. And guess what? Doesn't stop there, folks.
Yeah, because Richard, when they search his home, they find over $14,000 of ransom money hidden in his garage, wrapped up in rags, stuffed in a tin can behind some boards. That's roughly a third of the total ransom. Yikes, my friend. This is a Scooby-Doo, oh, jeepers moment.
Hauptmann's explanation was that the money belonged to his friend and former business partner, Isidor Fish. Fish had gone back to Germany and died of tuberculosis in March of 1934, which is extremely convenient. Hauptmann said Fish had left a box with him, and when it got wet from a leak, he opened it and found the money. The prosecutors mockingly called this the Fish story, which, I'm not gonna lie, kind of great.
So, I'm his defense attorney here, which would be a really bad fit for me. But Fish was a real person. He really did go to Germany. He really did go ahead and die. And he really was Hauptmann's business partner. The story has never been definitively proven false. It just sounded too convenient that it was a dead man with a revolver that did it. But I have the money because Fish was, what, charitable?
So now he's in custody and he's beaten by police during the interrogation. And that is documented. He was questioned for hours without a lawyer, and by modern standards, the interrogation alone would be grounds for throwing out anything he said. Though by modern standards, maybe nothing would have been different.
So the trial of the century,
Dum,
dum, dum,
dum,
dum.
Wow, that wasn't planned. Proud of us.
January 3rd, 1935, Flemington, New Jersey. The trial begins. And Kathryn, this trial is an absolute fucking zoo.
Yes, it is. Now, Flemington is a tiny town, population of maybe 2,500, and it gets absolutely overrun. Reporters come from every country, photographers everywhere, vendors selling Lindbergh baby souvenirs outside the courthouse, like little replica ladders. It's freaking grotesque and pretty macabre and totally dark capitalism, which, by the way, Gabriel, how do you say macabre?
How are you supposed to say it? Cabra?
Oh.
You do your thing.
I mean, that's cute that you think that's right.
I just like to follow the rules, you know.
I think our listeners, and I can think of at least 2 of them who will shut you down after this with their opinion.
They're probably both right. So anyway,
sorry, guys, we had to. This is like the big debate.
700 reporters cover the trial. It's broadcast on radio. People are treating it like entertainment. One reporter describes the atmosphere as half carnival and half lynching, which is half terrible.
Now think about what the public is bringing to this courtroom, right? 2.5 years of frustration. The depression, it's still raging, so they need someone to be found guilty. Not just probably guilty, they need certainty. They need justice. And Hauptmann is perfect for that. He's German. He's an immigrant. He has a criminal past. In a country where nativism and anti-immigration sentiment are running high, Hauptmann is the ideal scapegoat. Or he really is just the perfect criminal for the crime.
So now the prosecution's case. Let me lay it out because it's a wee bit more complicated than people think. The thing is, man, the evidence against him was just kind of low-hanging fruit. I don't know that they had to even try hard. So the key evidence is this. 1, $14,000 of ransom money in his garage. That's a big one, quite obviously.
Yeah.
I know, right? So 2, handwriting experts. 8 of them. They all testify that Hauptmann wrote the ransom notes. 3, a wood expert testified. Yes, there are wood experts and they're not Kathryn.
Oh my God. Wow. I'm sorry for him, guys. I still love him though.
So, a wood expert testifies that the board from the ladder matched the floorboard in Hopman's attic. The wood grain and the nail holes, they lined up perfectly. 4, Condon's phone number was freaking written on a closet wall in Hopman's house, which is just absolutely damning. 5, witnesses placed him near the Lindbergh's estate before the kidnapping. And 6, Charles Lindbergh himself testified that the voice he heard shouting, "Hey, doctor," in the cemetery was Hopman's.
All right. And now the defense side, because there's a lot here that doesn't get talked about enough. They would claim that the case was entirely circumstantial, that no one saw Hopman at the Lindbergh's house that night. No one saw him with the baby. His fingerprints were not on the ladder, the ransom notes, or anywhere in the nursery. A fingerprint expert named Erastus Mead Hudson used an advanced silver nitrate process on the ladder and found no Hopman prints in places that the builder must have touched if it was him. The officials refused to consider his findings, and the ladder was then washed of all fingerprints. Washed of them. The prosecution didn't want fingerprint evidence that might show that someone else built it.
And then there's Hopman's defense attorney, Edward Riley. This is a whole thing in and itself. This guy was a big-name lawyer, but he was also battling alcoholism. And are you ready for it, Kathryn?
Mm-hmm.
Possibly syphilis.
Oh my gosh. This marks the 3rd episode.
I am just telling you what I learned. He even called Hopman Bruno in court. Remember, they called him Richard. And he called him Bruno in court, his own client. His defense strategy was, even to be kind, terrible. By modern standards, Hopman received constitutionally inadequate representation.
And so even if Hopman was involved, even if he was guilty, was the trial fair?
Now listen to the searching cross-examination.
When you took that money from that shoebox down into that garage, and you took those gold certificates and put them in a basket, one after another, 5, 10s, and 20s, whatever they were, you didn't count it, did you? No. And you left it laid in a basket all night and you didn't count it, did you? You left it another night and you didn't count it. That's right. And the reason you didn't count it was because you knew, didn't you? I didn't know anything.
During the cross-examination, Hauptmann contradicts himself and is forced to admit that he lied.
When you were arrested with this Lindbergh ransom money, you had a $20 bill. Lindbergh ransom money, did they ask you where you got it? Did they ask you? You did. Did you lie to them or did you tell them the truth? Did you lie to them or did you tell them the truth? I said nothing, folks. You lied, didn't you? I did, yeah.
So ends the great trial, with the verdict of murder in the first degree.
Because the evidence of guilt and the evidence of a fair trial are two completely different things. You can be guilty and also get railroaded. Those aren't mutually exclusive. And this dude got so railroaded, he could have been a conductor.
Ba-dum-bum. On February 13th, 1935, after 11 hours of deliberation, the jury finds Hopman guilty of murder in the first degree. He's sentenced to death. He'll maintain his innocence until the moment he sits in the electrical chair.
All right, so here's where we put on our investigation, because the case didn't die with Hopman. If anything, the questions have only gotten louder, like it's on its 4th drink.
Let me run through the major alternative theories. Theory number 1, Hopman had accomplices. The FBI's own initial report suggested that the kidnapping required at least 2 people. One person climbing a rickety ladder while holding a baby? Mechanically, that's extremely difficult, and it's not like he was a professional athlete. The prosecution insisted he acted alone, but even the governor of New Jersey, Harold Hoffman, he secretly visited Hopman in his cell and he publicly stated that he believed others were involved. They'll insist on this until the end, literally.
Theory number 2. And this one is dark, the inside job theory. Several researchers have pointed out that whoever did this knew the family's schedule, knew the layout of the house, and knew which window led to the nursery. The Lindberghs weren't even supposed to be there that night, remember? Someone knew they'd stayed. Violet Sharp's suicide has been taken by some as evidence of inside knowledge, even though she had an alibi. But the case screams inside job of some sort, right?
I would agree. Because theory number 3, and this one, well, it kind of rings true to me. though it's also extremely dark, because I guess this whole thing, though I joke a bit, is pretty freaking dark. The Lindbergh involvement theory.
No.
Lloyd Gardner, a professor of history at Rutgers, spent decades researching this, and he concluded that Lindbergh himself may have been involved in the abduction. Maybe not in the murder, but that the kidnapping may have been staged, or that the child's death was an accident that Lindbergh covered up.
And the motive that they point to is truly disturbing. Some may say macabre. Lindbergh was fascinated with eugenics and social Darwinism, the idea that humanity should be improving its genetic stock like we're racehorses. And there's evidence, hidden from the public at the time, that little Charlie had health problems. A rickets-like bone condition, an abnormally large cranium with unfused skull bones, hammer toes. He required mega doses of vitamin D and daily sun lamp treatment.
The theory suggests that for a man obsessed with genetic perfection, having an imperfect heir might have been a psychologically devastating thing. And Lindbergh's behavior during the investigation, controlling the evidence, isolating staff from police, insisting on cremation before a thorough examination could be done, and just being a really terrible detective in general, well, it kind of takes on a very different meaning when you're looking at it through this lens.
Now, I want to be clear. This is a theory, a controversial one. Many researchers firmly believe Hauptmann was guilty and acted alone, pointing to the ransom money, the handwriting, and the wood evidence. But the fact that a tenured records historian spent decades researching the opposite conclusion tells you that this case is not as simple as the textbooks make it seem. They want it neat, and this may have been more Jackson Pollock than the story the public was fed.
And then there's theory number 4, Noel Ben's theory that Anne's sister, yes, Anne's sister, Elizabeth Morrow, killed the baby in a jealous rage. Elizabeth had reportedly been in love with Lindbergh before he married Anne. It's definitely the most sensational theory and probably the least supported, but the fact that it was even published by a reputable author tells you how many loose ends this case may have. Could this have been a real-life soap opera? I don't know. It sure played out more like Days of Our Lives than CSI, that's for sure.
For sure. Now, April 3rd, 1936, Bruno Richard Hauptmann is strapped into the electrical chair at Trenton State Prison, and he's been offered a deal. They'll commute the death sentence to life in prison if he names his accomplices, but he refuses because he says there are no accomplices to name because he says he didn't do it.
I'm to tell the people of America that I am absolutely innocent of the crime, the murder. My conviction was agreed to price. I never saw the Lindbergh baby. Before God, I'm absolute innocent. I have told all I know about the crime. I shall go to death as an innocent man.
At 8:44 p.m., he's pronounced dead. He was 36 years old, and until the end, they thought he didn't act alone. But who did he act with? Lindbergh? Fish? Morrow? Could it have been somebody completely random?
His wife Anna spent the rest of her life, and she lived until 1994, and she proclaimed his innocence. She filed lawsuits against the state of New Jersey. She never stopped. And his last words reportedly were, maybe not the most badass, but they were, "They think when I die, the case will die. They think it will be like a book I close, but the book, it will never close."
And he was right about that. The case has never closed in the public imagination. Books are still being written. Researchers are still petitioning for DNA testing of evidence. The conspiracy theories are still debated. Well, like they do. I mean, we're doing a podcast on it.
And are we doing any conspiracy theories? The Lindbergh thing, probably conspiracy theory. And the sister-in-law, probably conspiracy theory.
There's a few.
Yeah, there are probably a few. So the Lindberghs themselves never really recovered. Not really. They had more children. They moved to Europe to escape the press. Lindbergh went on to become, how do I say this, deeply polarizing. His isolationism before World War II, his ties to Germany, a medal he accepted from Hermann Göring, his association with the American First Movement. The Golden Boy of 1927 becomes one of the most controversial Americans of the 20th century.
And here's the thing that kind of brings it full circle. The kidnapping didn't just change the Lindberghs, it changed the law. Congress passed the Federal Kidnapping Act, which was called the Lindbergh Law. on what would have been little Charlie's second birthday, June 22nd, 1932. It made transporting a kidnapping victim across state lines a federal crime. It gave the FBI jurisdiction that they'd never had before. And in a very real sense, this case created modern federal law enforcement.
It also created modern media circus trials. The coverage of the Hauptmann trial directly led to cameras being banned from courtrooms in most states for decades. The sensationalism was so extreme that the legal system basically said, never again. Until OJ.
Now that was definitely again. So Gabriel, after all this research, what do you believe? Did Hauptmann do it?
I think Hauptmann, at the very least, was heavily involved. The money is way too much to explain away. $14,000 in your garage is not, my friend left me a box. The handwriting evidence is compelling, but do I think he acted alone? I don't think one man climbs a ladder in the dark, takes a baby, climbs back down with a broken ladder, and leaves no fingerprints. I think there were others. I think the prosecution's insistence on a lone kidnapper was about giving the public a very clean, simple story during a really messy time in American history. That a man with a somewhat questionable mental acuity planned this whole thing himself kind of seems wrong, but he's definitely guilty.
I look at the way the investigation was handled, which was pretty much a clown show. The contaminated crime scene, the washed ladder, the beaten confession, the syphilis-infected, defense attorney. That's for you, babe. The media circus. And I think, yeah, he probably did it. But the process was so corrupted from the beginning that the truth just got buried under the spectacle, and because there has to be more to it.
Sometimes the system that's supposed to find justice becomes part of the problem. Two wrongs, retrospectively, when you can look back on it, you see that the approach itself was done entirely wrong. Totally foobar. How can you feel like there's justice when the way you got to it was its own injustice? It's tainted. It's like winning heads up 7-Up by peeking.
Now, a girl has to know what shoes were there before they pick the boy standing at the front of the room. You don't just pick the boy unless you know it's the boy.
You always pick the opposite sex because they will never pick on you. That's the secret.
Anyway, of course, it all comes back to context. A nation in crisis, desperate for a hero and desperate for a villain. Desperate for Batman and Joker. A celebrity so powerful that he controlled his own investigation for peak's sake. A legal system that was more interested in giving the public closure than actually getting it right. A German immigrant in an era of nativism. Strip all of that away. Strip away the depression, the celebrity, the nationalism, the media frenzy, and then ask yourself, would the outcome have been the same?
So we can try to litigate this from here, from this time, but the outcome is the same, I think. He was guilty. Whether he had to die, to me, is the big question.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Mugshot Mysteries. We'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating and a review because it helps the other true crime fans find us. And if you want to see the famous ransom note with its bizarre handwriting or photos of the ladder or the courtroom circus or Bruno Hauptmann himself, head over to TikTok and Instagram at Mugshot Mysteries Podcast for all the visuals from today's episode. And until next time, stay curious and stay safe. But before we go, I have to ask you, Gabriel, what did we learn today?
We have learned that the road to justice can be found through a series of really hijinksy injustices. We have learned that celebrities can get protections that are far more than they deserve, completely unadvised, and most likely going to mess them up in the end. Free Britney. Now, and they might also turn you into a Nazi sympathizer. We have also learned that the 1% is totally not going to go away, and that if history is to teach us anything, we may want to try to get off the couch and do something about it. And it's probably not a socialistic opinion, but the wealth gap is a problem that stares us in our not yet having faces every day. We have learned that instead of infighting, humankind is capable of such love and such compassion and such camaraderie as long as we feel like we're fighting for a common cause, as long as we're not pushed to division based off falsehoods and natural terrible assumptions. And finally, we've learned in an effort to be 40 and so deep, we've learned that maxims are there so we can repeat truths ad nauseum. And through that repetition, store their wisdoms like they're mosquitoes buzzing in our ears, so that we know, in some version, and also one written by philosopher George Santayana, in 1905. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Sneaky footsteps in the night, clues that vanish out of sight. Grab your hat and magnifying glass. We'll talk this case and have a blast. Mugshot Mysteries, we're on the trail. Twists and turns that never fail. Laughs and chills, it's quite the show. Who did it? Tune in to know. Stolen gem, a secret note, a shady figure in a trench coat. The clock is ticking, the plot gets thick. We'll crack this puzzle quick as a click.